just because of the fact that, it narrows down the conversation. If we start talking, I know there's a lot of guys in here that talk about commercial, multiple occupancy, high rise, mid rise, and everything in between. It becomes a whole different animal when it comes to vertical ventilation. So I thought if we could target in on your residential, I'm talking, single family, 2-family, 3-family homes, normal, ordinary construction, if you will. I thought we could narrow down the conversation that way. And so I'd like to start the conversation with this. On our Instagram tonight, we posted a series of 7 photos, I think it was. You can, while you're in this app, you can go out of the app, go into our Instagram. And as you go into the Instagram, you can look at our page and you can reference the pictures. The pictures they're listed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and 7. So there's 7 total pictures. These pictures were provided by Larry out of Houston a while back. Larry, were you at this job?
Yeah, actually I was. Steve and I both were.
Excellent. So this will make for a good conversation, because what I'd like everyone to do is, while we're talking, it's good to scroll through the photos and get an idea and mindset of, conditions. And as we numbered them, I tried to number them in what the progression I thought was on the fire ground, so that as we go and talk about what was being done here and reference different types of tips, tricks, hacks, tactics, you name it, conditions, and so on, we could refer to the slide with the numbers so that anybody watching, will certainly be able to reference what we're talking about. So, Sean, anything I missed, or Larry, anything I missed before we get rolling?
No.
Cool.
I think you got it, bro.
Yeah, I do want to say this. According to Clubhouse, I do need to advise that we are recording this, and as I bring people up on stage, people have to be aware that we are recording this. And so you'll hear me say that a couple times throughout the event, only to cover ourselves, to make sure that anyone that's willing to speak will be recorded, and this will be posted on our podcast down the road. So as we move forward, I'd love to say this. There's a long, old-school history of vertical ventilation. As far back, 100 years in this business, guys were swinging axes on the roof to open up the vertical ventilation. Why? Simply because heat and smoke rise, right? And so the idea of ventilation is to open at the highest point to allow for a better push on the interior, right? It's very simple and straightforward. And so the question very much is this then, is why do we need it, and do we still need it today? And so I'd love to get into the conversation, Larry, by maybe starting to talk about ventilation in and of itself, and then we could start referring to those slides, since that was a job you were at. I would love to get Sean's take on it. I do know up in Buffalo, they are tough truck city. They do open up very steep peaks as well as flat. So they're not held back by the construction of the buildings and so on. So, Larry, if you wouldn't mind opening up with a couple comments on vertical ventilation, then we'll roll into those slides, my man.
Sure. I think, and you've been present for some of the great debates on this, and I think that a lot of the principles of ventilation, no matter how you do it, it's got to get done. Whether you're oriented towards vertical, whether you're oriented towards just opening up horizontal, whether you're a big fan of PPV, at some point it even goes back to the whole truckless truck concept. At some point, truck work's going to get done. Ventilation's going to get done, whether you have a dedicated company or not. I've always been a big believer that roof ventilation is this way to clear an occupied space. But at the same time, too, it's also based upon building construction. It's based upon location of the fire. It's based upon reading what it's doing and where it's going. And so to say that you go to the roof every time, I can't say that. But at the same time, too, I think that we need the default, at least in our part of the country, down in the Texas area. I believe, and I think Chief Davis Mo's on here, the default position should be, we know we're going to go to the roof unless conditions warrant otherwise. That way, you're prepared. That's your mindset. That's what your tools, that's what your seating assignments are set up for. Because everything from there, it's easier to go backwards than it is to go in with a PPV mindset or a horizontal, let's break windows and open it up that way mindset, and then ramp up to going to the roof. If you always step off ready to go to the roof, it's easier to go backwards and be backwards compatible, if you will, to the needs than it is to try and be forwards compatible on the fly, if that makes sense.
Larry, let me ask you this. The culture from the Houston area, very truck-minded, truck-oriented. Was the roof a go-to position on the truck?
Yes. And Steve drove us for years, and we were on the truck together. And it's been an evolutionary process. You know, we lost Kim and Lewis at the McDonald's fire back in 2001, and so it was one of those things where, you know, that's a different type. It was a flat roof McDonald's, but realistically, ventilation in the Houston Fire Department has always been. You've heard of the Reed hoods, and Steve can attest to this. Mo can attest to this. It's one of those things where it kind of de-emphasized for a period of time ventilation coordinated engine and truck work, to where the engine crews could push in further, faster, deeper. And so realistically, I think in the last 10 years or so, you've seen a reorientation towards going to the roof, opening it up, pushing down, and then everything, the entire building wide improves. You improve the survivability profile for occupants. You make it easier for the engine to make the push. You make it easier to get to the seat of the fire. And so I think that you've seen the Houston Fire Department evolve back to where you've got very aggressive district chiefs with their tactics, such as Mo, not just because he's on here, but that's how he rolls. And you get in there and you got an engine and a truck that are working in concert, and it's a thing of beauty. Now, roof ventilation and coordinated effort, you know, what Sean has in Buffalo, they're the same way, engine and truck. So consequently, I think it comes down to how you're set up, what the philosophy is, what the mindset is. If you're running all quints, or if your building construction doesn't allow for it, a lot of times you have to differ when the ventilation occurs. Is it prior to pushing through the door? Is it in coordination? Is it afterwards? And so it really comes down to the composition. How many resources do you have on a box? There's so many things that come together to determine if it's a viable tactic. Because let's face it, you can open a roof all day long, but if you don't do it in a timely fashion, what's the point?
No, I get it. And very good points made. A lot of good points there that we're going to start breaking down. Sean, I want to get your take on this just from the region you're in. I know you guys are very truck-oriented, inside, outside teams, and so on. Can you elaborate a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So much like the chief said, you know, our per SOP, our second truck assumes roof operations. And we keep that assumption going until we're told otherwise. And so basically, no matter what, using my crew as an example, we're bringing my ladders. So we're bringing them with us every fire. If we're second due, we're taking the ladders off our rig. I know our ladders. I know how they work. I know their quirks. We use the continuous halyard, which is a whole other discussion. But and if we get close to the scene, excuse the radio. If we get close to the scene and the chief's like, truck 7, I don't need you to go to the roof, we just set them down. We'll get them later. But we used to always open. We just get up there, open the roof years ago, and now obviously times have changed, things have changed. Now the incident commander makes the final decision based on info he might be getting from the crews on the inside. But we send 3 engines, 3 trucks on every box. The third truck is the fast truck or RIT, but the second trucks per SOP, their job is to get to that roof and assume it's getting opened.
Gotcha, makes sense. And you run 4 in a truck?
Correct. Yeah, 4 officer and 3 firefighters.
Okay. And so as time ticks on, I mean, you're an old school city. You got a lot of 2.5-story and 3-story wood frames, correct?
Yes, our bread and butter is a 2.5-story wood frame with balloon frame construction. That's most of our city.
Okay. And talk about that then, you know, because tactic-wise, right? I mean, as we start talking about things here, there's cultures where, you know, peaked roofs don't get opened up. There's a culture where the roof doesn't get opened up at all, and so on. And then in some of these northeastern cities or northern cities where, you know, old construction, very close exposures, and so on, and challenge pitches and steep pitches and so on. It's not a lot of, it goes into the factor making, but it's not a deterrent, correct?
Yeah, we're making that determination. We almost, you know, a 12-12 pitch is common here, and we just have to get used. The guys just have to work a little harder. We don't. A lot of the newer rigs are smaller. We don't run quints anymore. All our trucks have pumps, but none of them have water tanks. So we're fortunate enough that most of them we can have back to the 2-fly 35s. They're a little bit lighter, a little bit easier to maneuver. But much of our district, especially my second due district, that's our go-to. We have to throw the 35. We have to throw the 20-foot roof. And so a lot comes with it. You know, there's guys in this room and gals in this room that throw 24s and 28s single person. I don't have to do that. And I'm lucky. And, you know, but we're going to the roof unless we absolutely can't. And a lot of our city, because all but one of our truck companies are towers, it limits our ability to get to the roof via aerial when we start talking about on residential streets. We just can't do it sometimes, which makes it even more of a challenge to get to some of the roofs. We just had, unfortunately, an incident here a couple of weeks ago where we had the roof didn't get open. The guys were working hard. We're dealing with 2 foot of snow in between the houses. They're close together. By the time they got up to get the roof open, the kid that was working was spent. He was shot, and unfortunately, fortunately, the situation, the guys made a good knock, and it didn't have to get open. But they were dealing with a nasty pitch. They were dealing with snow. They were dealing with the fence that was in the way, a car in the driveway, and you just had to make it work. And that comes through, practice and training.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's so many variables involved, and I know as we go, I mean, it's so many nuggets here between Larry and you, and the things, and the mindset, the obstacles, the construction, the fire conditions, the staffing, the alarm assignment. I mean, all these things go into play. But I'd like to maybe start off then, getting an understanding of both of you, and that we've done now, and the cities you come from or run from. If you will. Let's talk about why. Let's talk about the issue for and the pros for opening that roof. I mean, there's, as we saw tonight, maybe before you guys hopped in, but there was a new guy in here, brandy new in the academy, and I brought him up on stage, and he just said thank you for doing this because he wants to pursue this and so on. So we have all sorts of people in this room listening, and so we have the very new to a very experienced and many years on the job. So let's talk about vertical ventilation. Larry, maybe you can hop in. I know you're pretty articulate when it comes to diagnosing and discussing things like this. So maybe you can hop in and give me some rundown of the requirements, things to look for, what do we need why do we need to do it, and so on.
Did you just say I'm articulate?
No, I'll never say that
Okay.
again.
Yeah, right.
You speak well, my man.
Yeah.
You speak well.
I think what it comes down to is, just because you set the parking brake, you've got to read the building and all. I think I heard Kevin say it when we were down in San Marcos. I know I've heard other people say it. You got to understand what you're looking at. We have to know our enemy, which is the building, and based upon what's presenting when we set there, if you really and I really do put a lot of stock in. If you're looking at the smoke, you can see what it's doing in terms of velocity, color, density, and couple that with what you know about the building. Hey, if you've made runs in this building, whether it's a house or an apartment, I think a lot of it comes down to if you have the ability to know what the smoke is telling you, if you have an idea of what the building construction is or a good working knowledge, then you have an idea of where it's going. And that's the first thing. Are you going to vent for fire or are you going to vent for life? Obviously, if you're going to the roof, you're trying to control fire spread. You're not overly concerned about venting to control the path of the fire other than stop it from running laterally on you, especially on a flat roof. We don't have a lot of flat roof single dwellings down here because of our rainfall. They do happen sometimes in townhome rows and some single family dwellings, but they're not very common. And so a lot of our stuff, it's always pitched roof. It's not as extreme as what Sean was describing for Buffalo. In the slides, you'll see that's an extreme pitch for us by and large. That's not, a very common pitch. It's usually not nearly that severe, especially on one stories. They're getting more popular with cathedral ceilings. Obviously, the pitch is starting to increase, but that's out in the suburbs or unless it's just a regentrified area in the city of Houston where they're knocking things down and rebuilding. But know your building, know your tool assignments, know where you're sitting, and what your responsibilities are. And when you set the parking brake, your default needs to be we're going to the roof. And you need to assess it. Where are we entering? Where are we getting up on? How are we getting up on? I'm not going to say the politically incorrect thing of I'm not a believer in roof ladders, but based upon the pitch, a lot of times, and Steve will tell you, we use the roof ladder to get to the roof. After that, there's no point in hanging out longer than possible or needed. Get up there, cut the hole, punch it, get off. And we've had some close calls. I'm sure Sean has. I'm sure everybody in this room has, where you get down and your feet touch the grass and you're like, wow, that was close because everything fell in. And so you have to understand what you're doing. It has to be timely. It has to be coordinated. If the officer's surveying everything, you don't need to have a party on the roof. It doesn't take 6 people. You got one guy cutting, one guy punching. You got your officer up there watching. He's checking everything with the tick, making sure it ain't rocking on you underneath or taking off. And then after that, it's cutting, punching, and getting off.
Good points, right? And so, I have a note here that something I wanted to talk about is, and it's underlined. It says after the cut, right? You make a very good point that the art of vertical ventilation, opening that roof should be done quickly, efficiently, and it's time to go. But there are times that you see, and there's different cultures where, we teach, an opening, you do your inspection. The inspection looks like it needs to be cut. Then we continue to cut off the inspection hole. You make that hole, you make it a sizable hole, right? The 4x4, I think they teach in the basic training. You open that hole and then it's time to go. But there are different, types of buildings and so on that require different types of cuts as well. But Sean, let's talk about, for yourself, the equipment you guys run. How do you guys primarily open that roof? I mean, is your whole 4-man truck going to be ascending and taking care of that roof work?
Not if we can help it. So it's the conditions have to dictate the tactics, as we say, but generally it happens like this. I'm bringing the roof ladder from the back of the rig. This way I can get up there quicker. Like I said, most buildings, I know the streets. I generally know that we're going to need a 20-footer. My 2 guys in the back, my 2 jump seat firefighters are bringing the roof ladder. Or, I'm sorry, the extension.
You there, Sean? Cutting out.
Yeah, my phone rang. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right.
Somebody didn't get the message. One of my Android friends didn't get the message that we're doing this here.
People.
Yeah, so my crew, the guys are going to roll up, and my driver's going to bring. Obviously, everybody's got their hand tools, but my driver's going to bring the saw. We're still using cutter's edge chainsaws, event saws. We did get a few new ones on the new style Ventmaster, I believe they are, on a couple of the trucks, but we don't have one yet. So setting the ladder, first 2 guys are going up. Generally, it's one of my veterans is the first to the roof for obvious reasons. They can help make the determination if things are safe. Then my youngest guy is going to go. And then if I need to, we're all going to head on up. But most of the time unless it's a crazy snow or one of the extreme pitches, we're doing one roof ground ladder. And like Chief said, we're not hanging out up there if we can avoid it. But sometimes we can do more good if it's safe underneath us. We can do more good up there than the guys in the attic. You know what I'm saying?
No, I get that completely. I mean, there's been many roofs that we've ripped the whole side of the whole one side of the home off because the conditions warranted it, and we were in a good spot to do so. So I mean, I get that, right? I love the difference.
Jeremy?
Yeah.
I just wanted, Sean, when you talk about that senior man that you try to get up, on the back step, getting him up towards the roof first, like what are the things that he's looking for the people who are new, who don't have that experience? Like what is he doing in his size up as he's making it, and what's his communication to you as the officer, letting you know what the conditions are like? Because I think a lot of times some of our listeners, this might be their first time they're going up to the roof, and it might be them and another classmate in the volunteer service that just went through school a couple months ago, or it could be like 2 guys on probation.
Yeah, so that's a good question, Rob. So he's sounding the roof, obviously, and foremost. So we're making the determination where to open from the ground. So we might realize, we're 15 feet from the fire. We need to get further back. He's making those kind of determinations. He's going to decide if, obviously, if the roof's safe, if we can continue on. If we're going to be able to get it done, if it's a 5, roof that's got 4 or 5 roofs on it, which isn't uncommon here either. So he's making all the determinations that I would make as the officer. But, we're not in our city. The officers not really shouldn't be the first guy, the second guy to the roof. Generally, if we're all going, if all 4 of us as a team are going, I'll be the third one up. Sorry, I just paused for the radio, but I'd be the third person up. And I carry the tick. Fortunately, my crew, they all the guys have decision or situational awareness ticks, so he can get a look at the roof with his flare. They're all carrying flare K2s, so he can get a look quick and make a determination of what's going on in the attic if for some reason we're unsure, if maybe the engine hasn't made the attic yet or something like that. But he's just making the determination, and I use the senior guy just simply because he's my extra set of eyes. I use him for everything. And that's another discussion for another day too, Jeremy. I know that you love talking about the senior man, but he has to know what I'm thinking, what I'm looking for. And I have to trust if he says, Cap, this is no good, we can't do it. Then I radio up to the chief and or the incident commander and say, look, we're not going to be able to get this roof open for whatever reason. If it's spongy, if it's already burned through, if we already see fire impinging through the roof, it's about to be ventilated anyways. So sometimes that's decisions that he's making for us,
Sean,
for me.
some good points there. Right?
Thank you.
Something that's on my brain real quick is, on these larger old style 2.5 story wood frames with the steep pitches, I mean, typically the half story is the attic half story is basically a full story with, knee walls on both sides typically. And it's typically a living space in a lot of these cities. And so, my question is, when you guys roll up, if we have a compartmentalized fire in one of these very large 2.5 story or 3 story wood frames peaked, how do you determine, is there open communication with the engine company or the engine company boss or the first due truck boss where the location of the fire has been found? Because a lot of times on these compartmentalized fires in bigger homes, it's not just going to the peak and making an arbitrary cut, right? So Larry brought up a good point before too, when you start talking about vent for fire, vent for life, right? Are you venting over the stairs? Are you venting over the part involved? So when you mentioned using cameras, that's a nice little trick, right? To see the heat signatures on the building itself. But rule of thumb for you guys, Sean, if you don't have fire showing, or you don't have a good idea of the location of the fire, are you going to be doing inspection cuts on a steep peak because you're working off that roof ladder? You're going to shimmy across the ridge beam? What's the play?
Yes, so we would do that if need be. Now we don't want, on a steeper peak roof like that, I want the guys working off of it. We were trying to get those Ross platforms. I'm sure people are familiar with them. We didn't use them. So the first guy up's going to start shimmying up and down. Oftentimes, and you'll see, I'm sure in some of the slides, you'll see our decisions are kind of made for us where we have to set our ground ladders based on the windows, based on openings on the ground floor, based on where the hose lines are going. So we may not be able to set our ladder exactly where we want to, which means we have to get up and work. And as long as we're working away from the ladder so that if something breaks through on us, we can shimmy back to the ladder and still have our way out. We don't cut off our own egress. But that's absolutely, if we're not sure, or for whatever reason, like I said, the engine may not have made the stretch, or more and more we're having finished living spaces in these attics. And so we might be in one room and the fire's in the room next to it, and we're not. So that's all a decision made, again, on scene as we go. But we certainly will shimmy the roof, work the ridge line, and start making inspection cuts, or even just spike the pike. We still use pike axes, still spike the pike of your axe through, see what you can see what the smoke looks like coming out of there, and help figure out where we really need to open it up. I mean, with COVID and everything, we have more and more people living in unfinished illegal occupancies in the attic. In fact, we had a double fatal not 5 months ago here, or triple fatal, excuse me. A family was living in an illegal attic space, and nobody knew they were there, which was sad. But
Sean, that brings up a great point, right? I mean, times are changing a little bit with the COVID and everything. But on top of that too, I mean, you start talking about living spaces, and that just goes to that conversation that you got to search 100% of these buildings, and and that we can't take for granted that attic space or crawl space or a sub cellar or anything like that is not livable. So, Larry, real quick for you, man, give me a little history on back in your days before we start getting to these slides. Now, are you guys a chainsaw department as well, like the Vent Master or the Cutter's Edge, or are you guys circular saw, rotary, like the Northeast has a lot of rotary departments?
No, 68's truck is pretty emblematic. You're going to have trucks that are set up based upon their neighborhood. If you go to 46s, they're oriented towards more one-story wood frames. In our territory, we're oriented towards multifamily dwellings, single families. So you really have a combination of a saw composition. 68's truck carried 2 chainsaws, 2 cutoff saws. The 2 cutoffs, one was set up for ventilation, one was set up for forcible entry. And so the engine actually carried a K12 as well. just car fires. And if they get someplace and the truck's delayed, that way they can force entry to a garage door if it's a warehouse, because we did have a small warehouse district around 68s. So it's really a combination, and this is where I'll probably catch hell from guys in the room. I'm a firm believer in that you take only what you need to the roof. The more you take, it has two complicating factors. It takes longer to get it all there, and it takes longer to get it up to the roof. And in reality, if you check your stuff out in the morning, if your chains are good, if it's been run, if it's got fuel, if you're squared away with the air filter, if everything is good to go, you don't need to bring everything. You see people, again, personal preference. They bring a set of irons. They bring a hook. They bring a saw. They'll bring a backup saw. And then they've got 3 people or 4 people or 5 people going to the roof. Not only does that slow you down in getting there, but the inverse problem is that the fire is still degrading the roof structure. Every 30 seconds longer it takes you to get the job done, that roof is that much weaker. So I've always been a big proponent in check your stuff, bring only what you need, get it done, and get off. And so realistically, if it's a single family dwelling, it's a chainsaw all day long. If it's a flat roof commercial, you're going to go with the rotary, unless you know it's lightweight concrete. We got burned more than once, and we finally learned a chainsaw for us on lightweight concrete is actually better to get through the lightweight concrete than a rotary saw. Then once you get to the metal decking, you got to switch to the rotary. But it's those little things that you store in the back of your mind, and so you know based upon where you're going and the type of structure what you need to take. But you don't need to unload that truck to get up there and do it.
Couple good points made for sure. And the one thing I love about this conversation tonight is just we have 2 very big extremes, right? Larry, where you are, you're talking single story, 1.5 story, maybe a 2-story, residential dwellings, right? Ordinary construction, typically warm weather, right? So you're not dealing with the snow like Sean is. Sean's dealing with large 2.5 story, 3-story, steep pitched roof homes, tight exposure. So this is a good conversation because you guys are dealing with, really different elements across the board, and yet the function is still the same, right? Larry, you mentioned you guys, the roof ladder sometimes gets you to the roof and you don't need it because you can get up and off so quickly by zipping a hole in a 1.5 story, a non-steeped pitch, a shallow pitch. So yeah, for sure. All right, what I'd like to do is everybody in the crowd. I do want to say this: we are recording this. I do have to do that. I would love some interaction as well. So if anybody down in the crowd does have a comment or a question or want to come up and have something to add to the conversation, please do, man. This is an open mic, open forum. You're welcome to come up. All you got to do is hit the button on the bottom to raise your hand, and then Rob or myself or one of the other guys can bring you up on top. Please feel free to jump in. I know there's a world of knowledge down in the crowd and so on. But what I'd like to do is I'm going to toggle out of here, and I want to go into our Instagram on National Fire Radio, and I want to look at the pictures that we posted today. So if you go to our page and you look, we numbered slides. We have a post with slide number 1 shows I'd say a 2.5 story ordinary. We got fires showing on the one side, and as you scroll through the pictures, you'll see the progression. Larry, this was one of your fires, my man. So would you mind setting the stage for this? And then Sean, I'd love some insights from you as well.
Yeah, if it's a newer construction, 2-story single family dwelling. It was right on the edge of the city, and we're 82's engine got in first, their single engine house. It actually started as a Division 1 fire on the Bravo side. You can see where it's all burned out. It was about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, if I remember correctly. And this fire was at least 10 years ago. But 82's made a push through the front door. They were dealing with the fire to the left. I think that was the first fire I was ever riding captain on the engine. And we actually went in. I tapped the captain on the head from 82's, who was a ride-up also. And I told Rodney, I said, hey, we're going to the second floor. And I made some mention of don't lose the stairs, because where they were, the stairs were right behind them. So we made up to the second floor, and about the time you got to the Division 2 floor on the stairs, it blacked out. And it was turning good in the attic, as you can see. If you go to slide 2.
Yeah, Larry, you were on the first due engine?
No, second due. I was on 68. 82's was first in.
Okay, all right.
And so 82's blacked out Division 1. When we got to Division 2, if you look at slide 2, that's pretty much what we were confronted with. The guys on the nozzle got a quick knock on that, but it was already up into the eaves, and we knew it was in the attic. The problem is that by the time we were able to get up to Division 2, black out what we could in that room, we started opening up ceiling, and then it was just churning in that attic. And then if you look on slide 3, you'll see 82's knocked down Division 2. We had knocked down Division 2, but the attic was just getting it still. And that's when our truck, 68's truck, was first ladder truck. It was down, Mo will know where this is, and Steve does. It's down around essentially West Airport and Gessner. So it's right on the edge of the city before you go into a neighboring suburb. And so at that stage of the game, the truck went to the roof. And as you progress through the slides, you'll see the smoke condition coming out of the eaves and that Delta side window just intensify. And we stuck a pipeman up in the attic. He tried to make the attic, came down, hands are on fire, almost literally. He can't make the push any further, helmet's melting, everything. And so at that point, we know the truck, we can hear the saw running. And when you look at slide 5, I mean, it was churning on the second floor. I mean, we were down on our knees and it was getting it. And at that stage of the game, I mean, the truck was a godsend. Ladder 68 had a great senior captain, a hell of a senior pipeman. They had, with that hip roof and all the different angles, they had some negotiating to do. But by the time they got up there, I mean, it was so heavily charged that if you get to slide 6 and 7, you'll see they actually, when it broke, when they got the hole cut and they pushed it, I mean, it was a light switch for us. And everything lightened up. We were able to make the push into the attic. But there was so much pressurization in the attic that they got vent point ignition. It didn't light off just coming out of the attic with fire. It was about 6 to 12 inches off the roof deck is where it finally ignited. There was so much gas. There was so much coming out of the attic that it literally was coming out under the pressure that it didn't light off till literally 6 inches to a foot off of the roof deck. So they got the vent point ignition, and then it was time to go. Lightweight wood truss. A lot of people will tell you if it's been burning longer than 10 or 12 minutes, don't get on the roof. We would have burned the roof off of that house had that truck not got up there and did it. As soon as they did that, within 3 or 4 minutes, boom, fire was out in the attic, went outside, took a break.
I love it. I mean, when you sent me these pictures, it was just the perfect. I mean, whoever captured these shots are just, it's ideal when you talk about the benefits of what vertical ventilation can do. And then for you to be in that position operating on Division 2 or the second floor, whatever you want to call it, you know, for you to be in that position where you're basically kissing carpet and then once that roof gets opened up and everything lifts like that, I mean, it's a godsend. I've done it as well. I've been in that position. I think anybody that's been on an engine that had the roof opened up and the sheetrock pushed down, they do appreciate that, and it allows for the push. And I think you make a very good point, Larry, is that attic space was supercharged. I mean, that thing was ready to go, and surely that cut allowed for everything to exhaust so that you guys can finish that push on the interior.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the truck earned their money that day. As a matter of fact, I think we got back to the station. If I remember correctly, Steve was cooking dinner, and good. That night. Now everybody was tired, but I mean, it was in my 27 years in Houston, that was probably the best chronological order of photos. They were taken by a paramedic show for Jay Grantham, and he was standing out front and he was taking the pictures when he was on medical standby, and he stayed in the same position pretty much throughout the fire. And just the progression of the fire really captured. I mean, on that slide 5, I mean, it was getting nasty on Division 2, and when that truck cut the hole, I mean, it was just, and I hate to go on because I like truck work over engine work. And so I'm not trying to glorify it, but I mean, that made all the difference in the world.
I love it. Sean, what are your thoughts, man? You've been looking at these pictures. I sent them to you earlier. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I as far as getting to the photographer, the point, every time I talk, the radio goes off. Sorry. When I love when fire buffs or photographers are there and they make photographs versus just taking pictures. You know what I mean? And these are so good to go through and do what we're doing or teach from them versus people that get enamored by the flames. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. So these are really, really quality photos. So Yeah, so this house, I'm guessing what Chief, you said is a relatively new build. So that's the the way we do first floor, second floor. We do 1, 2, 3, 4 up here. We're not that bright to do divisions. So, but seeing the way these guys operate, like in photo 4, not to that is foreign to us simply because we would have ground ladders there, and obviously it worked. And I'm not criticizing them because it's just different animals, but our chiefs are very careful with us on the roof, especially, and maybe it's because it's still a relatively new thing here, the residential lightweight construction. There's so many old, my house was built in 1927. You could drive a truck into it. So our chiefs get extra cautious when they're dealing with this type of construction, and it's not because they don't understand. It's just because for us it's such a foreign thing. And getting back to what we talked about earlier about hanging out on the roof, they won't let it fly up here. They want us up, off, get the cut, and be done. But looking at the photos, it does look like they did a great job, and they made all the difference. The difference between photo 5 and photo 6 is pretty remarkable. You see the hole opened up and the smoke.
Look at conditions on the second floor, right? I mean, look how those conditions lifted. If you look at even photo 1 and 2, from the front of that building on that A side, I mean, that attic space is just seeping. I mean, it's hungry and it's seeping and it's pushing pretty good. And then as you get through the pictures, you look at 4. I mean, it's coming out of the eaves pretty good. It wants to go. And 5, forget it, right? And then 6, all of a sudden, there's nothing from the eaves anymore. And so the cut, I mean, that just is a super good example of the benefits of a vertical ventilation, for sure. I do know Steve's down in the audience in the room. Steve, if you want to hop in, brother, I'd love to have you up here. I'd love to hear your take on this because, I take Larry at 75%. So, I got to make sure that
Killing me.
Well, listen, I do have a gentleman that he's going to come up into the room in a minute. I think he might have a couple nuggets for us that might hit home. So I'd love to hear what he has to say. If he's there, he is. Captain Dugan, are you there?
Oh, yes, sir.
How
Can
are
you
you,
hear
brother?
me? I'm doing well, man. Not bad for a fat old man,
What do you think of this clubhouse?
I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty interesting, and I think there's a lot of things that we can talk about.
For sure.
So I have a couple of questions for Larry on this building. And in photo 4 and 5, I am looking at a window that is up above by where that drain pipe comes up. Is that living space? What is that window up at the top above the double hung window over the air conditioning unit? To my left of it is another window. What is that up there? Is that living space?
Are you talking about the half window, Cap, or the
the half window? What's the half window?
bathroom?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering if that was a bathroom. Yeah.
Okay, I wasn't sure if that was a bathroom or if it was a half window because they converted the attic into living space in this place.
No, sir. Cap, that was a bathroom.
Okay. So, again, I have some questions. This is a newer home, and I understand the roof ventilation on a newer home in some of them. But has anyone or any of you guys ever done the roof ventilation where you don't bother with the saw? You go up and you whack the ridge vent off and just use a hook or a Halligan and just steel the vent, because always when they construct the roofs, the first sheet on the bottom is a full sheet of plywood. The cut sheet is normally near the top. And if we whack the ridge vent off and use a Halligan and pop it off, we can get the same hole as a 4x4 cut. If we get a 2x8 sheet ripped off, we have the same vent hole, and we never had to bring a saw up on the roof.
Yeah. Hey, Cap, on that one, there was a ridge cap, but no ridge vent.
Okay.
And so that was the whole deal. If you look at some of the pictures and kind of zoom, yeah, we definitely were down with that. If you could hook it and pull it, I mean, you can pick up 15 square feet of ventilation space pretty easy in the span of left to right on that house. But if memory serves and looking at the pictures, there was no ridge vent on that house.
Okay. And now the second question I have is, if you don't mind, Jeremy, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, brother. Please. The floor is yours.
Okay. I know me, my house. I've been married in May. It'll be 35 years. Jesus Christ, I'm getting old. I've been married for 35 years. I know what's in my attic. And my attic is full of crap. Okay. It's her stuff. Okay. And it's all up in the attic. If I vent the roof of my house right now and I go to push down the top floor ceilings, because don't you really have to push down the top floor ceilings to vent the living space to make a change in the rescue profile?
Yes,
And
sir.
I can't do it in my house because of the plywood, because I put plywood across my whole attic to allow me to put more stuff up there, because she keeps on buying more stuff. Okay. So again, the difference in the tactics depend on the buildings, the neighborhoods, and everything else.
On this particular one, Cap, we had 82s had knocked down to the Division 1 fire. We had knocked down the Division 2 fire. It was already in the attic. If you look at the earlier photos, it had already gotten up there. And so actually what we were trying to do was make the push up into the attic through the access stairs.
Right.
And we ran into some decking issues by pulling ceiling, and we're looking at the bottom side of plywood. So what you're saying happened to us there. But what we had was a well-involved attic fire at that point. Also, it had extended 1 to attic. And so the only way we could actually get a hose line in operation in the attic and knock it down, we had to have some relief. And so when that truck made the cut, it allowed us to get that line up in operation in the attic, because pulling ceiling wasn't getting it done for us because of the decking that you mentioned. And so we were able to push up in the attic access ladder and get a knock on the fire after they were able to get those gases and everything out for us.
Okay, interesting.
You know, part of the conversation too is that I've seen with a lot of the newer construction in my area, what's happening is with these lightweight residential trusses that they're putting in and so on, a lot of that void space, which you can consider attic space, is not like your home or my home where we're throwing up the Christmas decorations and everything else. A lot of that is a true void space with very limited access. And so in those prefab trusses in the newer construction, you don't have any plywood decking, because people don't typically have access for storage in those areas. And with the way the trusses are built, there's really no storage area to be had. We had a fire not too long ago. It was cranking good in a townhouse, middle of the road townhouse, brand new construction. It was all lightweight residential trusses and gusset plates and you name it, long stretches, cathedral ceiling in the rear for the great room and kitchen, and so on. And the majority of the fire was, it started in the flue pipe, brand new construction, second time the guy's ever had a fire in his wood burning stove. So Toll Brothers certainly ate the cost on this one, but something with the piping for the wood burning stove wasn't wrapped correctly. It got up in that void, and we had no interior access to that other than hooking the sheetrock. But you had probably from sheetrock to the highest pitch was at least 14 feet of void space. And so there's no access to that. There's no decking there. There's no storage in there. And so in that type of situation, I mean, that is just a free space for just an incredible amount of energy to take hold. And so opening that up is super critical. The other thing too is I know in my home is just like yours. I mean, my attic's full of shit. It's got a plywood deck across the hall. So really opening up the attic is only going to be beneficial for venting the attic space. It's going to be very difficult to punch through to make a difference, maybe create tenable space on the second floor for vertical ventilation. That's where the horizontal ventilation, I think, really plays in the older homes for sure.
I agree, and that's where you have to know your buildings, and you have to understand this, because very honestly, for me, if all that shit burnt, she's up in bed, so I can say this now. But if all that shit burnt, I would be thrilled. You know, have to start over. I got so many bags of Christmas decorations, it drives me insane.
I love it. Well, thank you, brother. Good stuff, man. I appreciate it, Cap. Thank you so much. Always so.
No problem.
Voice, brother. Steve, what's up, brother? You're up on the stage.
What's happening, buddy? How you guys doing?
Good.
Good. You know,
Go ahead, dude.
the one thing that's not discussed on this, and Larry was inside, so he probably, he knows now, but didn't realize at the time, is before the boys went to the roof, we attempted horizontal ventilation on the A side. So you can see the two windows over the garage that are busted out. I did that as a truck chauffeur with the roof ladder. I opened that up and then placed that. And on slide one, that's the truck crew getting ready to ascend to go to the roof. So that was coordinated. That horizontal ventilation was coordinated with Engine 68's entry with the second line up to Division 2. And we can hear them on the radio talking about the conditions, and the truck crew was getting ready to go to the roof. So we knew at that point they needed a hole. There was no choice.
No, I agree with Steve, because I know I got on the radio a couple times and said, "Hey, where's the truck at?" And you could hear them pounding their way to the peak, because I called at least twice on the radio saying, "Hey, we need a hole in this." I may have actually violated FCC rules a couple times with an adjective, and that was utilized. But
It happens, brother. It happens.
hey, Division 2 was getting hot, and all I know is that we needed some relief because we weren't going to do much when we were down on our hands and knees.
For sure.
And Cap Dugan, just, you were talking about all the crap in the attic and a decked out attic, and my house is the same way. I mean, you really got to pick and hunt for an area that you'd be able to put a hook through the roof deck and hit sheetrock to the ceiling below. And in Houston, in a lot of the areas, we got this side shack going on behind the scenes. When I was at 25s, 34s, whatever, and we're dealing with shotgun shacks, these little 800 square foot 1 stories with shiplap. You're dealing with that on the ceilings anyway, and we're still going to the roof. So I think maybe the geographical territory prepares us for that a little bit more. Now, plywood's a lot different, but Mo can talk a lot about, a 2-man pike pole, which is probably foreign to most people on the platform. But it's truly a 2-man pike pole. It's almost like a battering ram with a hook at the end. And sometimes it's got to be used. I do think that there's still something to be said for relieving heat, smoke, gases, pressure, even if you're not able to open up the ceiling below. That you're still dealing with a charged environment. And when you release that from the attic, the stuff that's in the living compartment is going to make its way to the attic. Not as fast as opening up the ceiling, but I do think you'll have a little bit of, path of least resistance.
Oh, makes good point, Steve, for sure. I mean, when that roof is holding that pressure in, and all you have is either a ridge vent or a soffit vent on each side of the peak or something like that. I mean, the exit for those gases and smoke is just too small, and so the pressure just continues to build. And I agree with you. Opening up, even if you don't have direct access either through the sheetrock or to the living space below, removing that pressure will better the pressure within the entire structure. I mean, I believe that for sure. Hey, Chief Mo, welcome to the stage, brother. Unmute yourself. Mo, where are you, buddy? Hit your mute button. There you go.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Hey, Chief. What's going on?
How you guys doing?
We're kicking ass, brother. It's good to have you up on stage with us. First time on Clubhouse?
Yes, sir. It sure is. Thank you.
What do you think?
I love it.
Good. So fill us in. Chief Mo Davis out of Houston, Texas. What do you got, Chief?
Hey, they were talking about that 2-man pike pole, and we also had another tool carried the truck crew would take to the roof. We called it a brick on a stick.
Lord.
And it's just something that firemen built. It's heavy. And once we'd cut a hole, we'd have about a 10 to 12 foot pole that we would just beat shiplap or plywood down from the roof. So we would attack it from underneath, and we'd also attack it from the top. And I jokingly said in our side conversation, it's a great tool as long as you don't drop it. So that was another option of, busting through plywood.
You know what I love? I love the little hack of bringing a D handle hook with you to the roof instead of a straight hook. A 6-foot hook with a D handle on it makes all the difference in the world, especially when you got to be pushing down and keeping a good grip on your tool. That's just a little thing. I always like, if I'm going to the roof, to grab that D handle instead of a straight pike. Mo, while I have you up here, brother, I mean, you are an aggressive command forward chief, and you do a considerable amount of work where you are. I'd love for you to speak a little bit to the command aspect of decision making upon arrival and what your expectations are. What your expectations are for arriving companies, and how important is the roof position in the grand scheme of your command structure.
I assign that quick. As we're approaching the scene, I always feel like the guys on the truck and the engine, they've got a lot of other stuff to worry about. So I start looking at the ridge vents. I start looking at the roof line, and I let the pressure of the smoke coming out dictate my assignments, whether it's the first in truck. If it looks like it's got a good amount of pressure, I ask them to ventilate. Not so much pressure, I'll ask them to do a primary search. I'll get the second truck to come in. So I have a little bit of leeway on that, but I let the pressure of the smoke dictate my first assignment for the truck. And I would say probably 80% of the time on the southwest side, it's going to be go to the roof to cut a hole. And just like a little side note, and I think Larry mentioned it earlier, that helps us dictate where the fire's going. If I get a good hole cut early, we stop the spread in common attics and the larger apartments. But I let the smoke dictate my first truck assignment. Has everything to do with smoke. And then the second truck, and we're fortunate, we got 2 trucks coming, and then the second truck I send them for the primary search.
Chief, for your decision making also, I mean, typically a lot of the structures that you're, say, residential in your first do, are they typically the homes and residential buildings that Larry was talking about before?
It is. The southwest side is so unique. We have anything from the 1900s to modern construction to a residential home to a block-long apartment complex to high rises. So it's really unique, and so many different aspects of it. But I would say probably, and Steve and Larry can speak on this probably better than I can, but I would think probably 70% is apartments, compared to where I grew up in the fire department as a captain and a senior. It was mostly houses. So, but now I'd say 70% is apartments.
Okay, garden style apartments, like center hallway, open staircase, center hallway, that type of thing.
It sure is. It is big setbacks. Real poor part of town. A lot of life hazards. A lot of challenging entry, forcible entry. So yeah, it's very unique. Southwest side of town is.
Hey, Jeremy, let me make a comment too.
Yeah,
as you mentioned ordinance, the good part is that Mo can attest to it. I know Steve can. We don't have a lot of center hallway apartments.
Okay.
Most of ours are garden walk-ups.
Gotcha.
And so where you hit a stairs, and when you get to the top of the landing, you go left to one unit, right to one unit, but it's open air. Center hallway apartments, historically in District 68 or southwest part of town, you have to treat those like hotels or motels because it's self-contained. God forbid the occupant leave the apartment open, the front door open. It's just like pushing down a hallway at a hotel.
Right.
I think Mo's probably 200 or 300 fires, or at least responses over to Forum Park, Sugar Branch, that area. And those are center hallway apartments. And that's a completely different beast than walk-up gardens. And the walk-up gardens, hose line deployment's a lot faster. After Katrina, when we had we had an increase in population of our apartments in Southwest Houston after Hurricane Katrina, and consequently had a lot of fires, a boatload of fires that started or that occurred. And what we ran into was that a lot of our center hallways, we had to come up with abbreviated tactics. What we had to do was realize that going to the center stairwell, which is middle of the building, and you've got a wing to the left and a wing to the right, If you stretch, you're using half your stretch to get to the center lobby, if you will, the elevator lobby. Then you're going to push up the stairs, Division 2, Division 3, and you're going to fall short. So what we wound up doing after making a couple of these is we would just go to the apartment adjacent, whether it be Division 2 or Division 3, throw a ground ladder to the balcony. We took the line to the balcony, forced through the door, went to the hallway, went over one unit, and came back to the apartment of origin. So what we were doing is we were limiting our time on air. We were conserving hose line length. And then at that point, we were able to push back into the fire department and all do it in a faster fashion, as opposed to going 60 feet, eating up 60 feet of a pre-connect to then go up 2 floors and then back down, and you always fell short, if that makes sense.
No, I get it. I like it. I like it a lot. And I love the clarity between the buildings too, because that does paint the picture as well. And I know, still have a Mo on stage and being and arriving in that command vehicle, buggy, whatever you call it, in your area. There's 1,000 considerations that have to be made on the fly. And so knowing the infrastructure, knowing the buildings, the construction, knowing the typical, there's a lot of conversation in the background going on right now about positioning and so on, but knowing the initial stretch, knowing what those setbacks are, getting that stretch in place. But that has a lot to do with the engine, right? When it comes to the truck, right, let's talk about the coordination between, and Sean, I'd like, as a moderator in the group, I'd like to get you real quick to discuss the communication and how important that is, because, when we teach ventilation, there's supposed to be this mutual coordination, a dance, if you will, where, the nozzle needs to be able to make the space and be ready to get water on that fire so that the truck can open up. Because if we open up too quick, we're going to allow for a quicker spread, conditions will change, and so on. And so maybe you could talk real quick about the importance of communication between the companies, especially when it comes to popping a top or even horizontal ventilation in this case. And I do want to say this before, Sean, you get rolling. There are a lot of other people in the crowd. Lou, you're up on stage. Great. We'll get to you in 1 second. We are recording this. I just have to throw that out there for the Clubhouse rules. We are recording this to be used at a later date. So we invite anyone in the crowd to please raise your hand and come up on stage. We'd love to hear some feedback, questions, some storytelling. Sean, go, man.
So the communication is key with us. And again, like I mentioned earlier, some time ago, the final decision became a command decision, whether we open the roof or not. So he would take if I'm communicating with the nozzleman or the nozzle crew that's making the ladder or making the attic space on the top floor, they're going to give the heads the call. Oftentimes, a few years back to my when I was a lieutenant at the Rescue 1, that was part of our job, was recon. So I'm getting as high as we can, and I'm making the call outside. But the communication's key. When these guys are giving us giving our hey, we need the roof, attic fire, any kind of serious fire in the attic that's going good. The chiefs are going to obviously not need the engine to tell them that we need it open, but sometimes they get so wrapped up that they don't make that call. And so we'll be on the roof. And this is where, I prefer to, if we can do it, just to have two of my guys go do the job on the roof, because they certainly can most of our roofs. And then myself and my other guy can go get reassigned, do some horizontal vent or go inside and assist. But, the clear communications is great. And it's so critical. But you have to these because we all know that. Sorry, I'm getting distracted. We all know what's happening if we get those roofs open too soon, or we get them open too late. Even we're going to stop the push and potentially burn the thing off. But we've had some incidents recently where there was a lack of communication between the guys on the ground, the guys in the attic, and the guys on the roof, and we burnt up equipment. Fortunately, we're lucky enough we didn't get anybody seriously injured, but the truck crew's making a hasty retreat off of the roof because it started to burn through, because that message got lost in radio traffic somewhere, whether they needed the roof, what the conditions were, younger crew on the roof. And next thing you know, it's burning through and they're scurrying down the ladder to get off. Matter of fact, we lost a roof ladder in that situation because it didn't make the trip.
Whoops.
Yeah, it turned into our short little VES ladder now,
There
though,
you
so
go.
we repurposed it.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Sean. I appreciate those insights. Lou, welcome to the stage, man. You got the floor, brother. What's up?
Hey guys, just down the road from Sean by Rochester, and we were texting back and forth about some things that Captain Dugan brought up. Those ridge vents, we both agreed kind of like 50%, depending on who the roofer that installed them was, that they get those even off. I've had about 50% luck on getting them off, but what I do like is when I pull them off, it lets me know what type of roof I'm on. If I'm not familiar with the area, or maybe they put an addition on, it'll let me know if there's a ridge beam there. All right, we got a little more time on that roof. If there's not a ridge beam, we know we got trusses. It also gives my sawman, he knows where to cut now, because he'll be able to see those trusses or the rafters. A couple other things I like to do with my guys is when we're up on roofs training, is just point out the box vents. If there's box vents up on roofs, a good roofer is not going to put a box vent over a roof beam. So if you know where a box vent is, that's the bay of the roof that's where you should be cutting. The other thing is what's popular in my area and in Sean's area, the Northeast, is the turbines. In the summertime, they put turbines up on the roof to suck the hot air out. And, those can draw the fire to places that you don't want, or it might take the fire where you want it. So depending on where the fire is, we'll disable those turbines, or we'll use those turbines to our advantage. Same with the box vents as well. If I don't want the fire traveling down the roof, I'll just go over and smash the box vent with my Halligan. But, one thing I wanted to ask Sean is, what kind of cuts do they do in Buffalo? I know what we do in the Rochester area. We climb to the peak on pitched roofs. We'll climb to the peak and straddle them and use a rotary saw and pull cut it. If it's walkable, it's a whole different story. It's very easy. We just do a real big box cut. But, it's weird. You go down the road to Syracuse and they do a whole different type of ventilation tactic, and you go west to Buffalo. I'm just interested what they do out west in Buffalo.
Yeah, so it's situational for sure. And I've had this discussion because there are some great, some famous cuts, if you will. The Milwaukee cut. The Syracuse kind of patterned their own cut that's kind of named after them. And our typical cut, I want my first person up onto the peak. He's getting off the roof ladder. He's allowing the second, perfect world stuff. This is what I want. Two guys up. First guy goes up to the peak. He's out of the way. Second guy comes up, he's making the cuts. He'll do a quick inspection cut, look and see if we're in the right spot. He'll make a version of the 798 cut, except we're opening it as one big hole. He's going to try to roll the rafters if he possibly can. Sometimes it just doesn't work depending on what you're dealing with. But he'll make the 5 cuts that it requires. One being as far down as he can go after the inspection cut, the top cut, and then finishing it down along the ladder, obviously overlapping each one of them. Then he can kind of come down. I prefer, if it's possible, and it doesn't always work, it's perfect world stuff. He comes down. The first guy that went up took either the hook or his. I'm sorry.
You got it, Sean.
His pike axe, and he can just pull that whole roof section off. And you're gonna have a nice, if it's 4x4, if it's 3.5x5, whatever it is. We're not. We'll do that most of the time. Sometimes we louver it. Sometimes on nasty heavy roofs, we will actually do the 798 where we'll cut it and we'll break it off into pieces. I try to avoid the louver cut where we're knocking that stuff back in, just because I've been on the receiving end of some roofing material hitting me, and and those that have seen me in person know I can't afford to get my head any more swollen than it is. But those two are the prime that we use. And on super steep pitches in the wintertime, we'll do that, key style, where they're bringing up two roof ladders so that everybody has a work platform, so to speak. But it's hard. I have a hard time getting people, and it's not a criticism of the guys, but we have a hard time getting 2 ladders thrown and in place quickly and efficiently. When you start throwing a third or even a fourth in, and again, like I mentioned earlier, most of our residential streets, it's hard to get our aerials up to assist us on getting to the roof. We have 8 of the 9 trucks in Buffalo are platforms of some sort, mid-mount or rear. We only have one straight stick left in the city. I disagree with it. It wasn't my decision, but So more often than not, our aerials are doing what I hate, and they're just transporting people and equipment to the fires. And but that's our two that we mostly do. Two people can do most of the work, and but again, the situations are going to dictate it. You have extreme, an extreme hurry and an extra need to get going because the conditions are deteriorating fast. Then you might pick a different method. For a long time, that kind of coffin cut where you're working from peak to eaves was real popular here. And that has its place, obviously, but I feel like that becomes more of an overhaul cut if you're still up there. If the conditions allow us to not have to get up right off the roof immediately, you can stay up there and you can help, like I talked about earlier, do a lot of the work from above versus the guys in the attic busting their chops where they're working overhead trying to push roofs. So those are the major ones.
Yeah, I agree. I was going to ask you about sorry, Chief. I was going to ask Sean with the ladder situation, and are you able to cut from the aerial at all? And you answered that. I mean, we try to get our aerial up, but it's probably the last piece of equipment that our ladder truck puts up, and we're on a straight stick, and it operates pretty quick. But we try to tell our guys that unless it's an apartment building, a 3-4 story apartment building that we have, the ground ladder should be the first things that go up, especially on a 2-story ranch. Or 2-story colonial. There's no reason for that aerial to be up out of the bed before those ground ladders are deployed.
Yeah, sometimes I wish we moved it more, but we used them more. But go ahead, Jeremy.
No. I was just going to say. I mean, this is what's exciting about this room and this conversation is that the differences in districts where the aerial may not be the number one priority on arrival. It could be because you have a 2-man truck and you just don't have the staffing for it right away, right? And the aerial becomes secondary to the other means of things that have to happen. So, but go ahead, Sean. I'm sorry.
No, that's exactly it. I just there's a purpose and there's a need. We had a good fire the other day, and as the first engine arrived, it was a 3-story ordinary building. So my driver immediately, we were second due, and I said you got a position. We need the aerial for this one, and he's looking at me like, "What do you mean, Captain?" He had initially assumed anytime we use the aerial, it's a defensive operation. I said, "No, we don't have a ladder tall enough to get to it. We're going to have to use the aerial." And as he pulled up, he's looking, and that, not to turn this into a positioning thing, but when you're coming up on the trucks, you need to slow down and figure out, because you get one shot at spotting these things. And he made a real good spot. We got as close as we possibly could. We took the aerial up to the roof. Unfortunately, we didn't get to open it. We don't get to do a whole lot of flat roof ventilation up here. We just don't get the fires in those type of buildings very often. And I was looking forward to it, but I didn't get to do any cutting.
Cool.
Hey, Jeremy, can I add something about that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Apparatus positioning. I know that's not the point of the class or of this conversation, but that may be one for the future. I know on the group text right now, Kevin.
I have a note here. It's circled about 100 times because all the
I think Kevin. Pags pointed it out, Kevin. But realistically, and I think it speaks to what the captain just said. Realistically, we need to train our truck chauffeurs better. I know I learned from Steve when he retired and I took over driving the truck. Our whole purpose in life, you hear this, we're a ground ladder. I think Lou made the comment, we're not going to get the aerial up. It's the last thing. Well, if you're riding a 4-man rig, which fortunately in the city of Houston we were, and they still are, there's no reason that chauffeur's first priority in life shouldn't be. If you got a beach hit in the front yard, you beach it in the front yard. The stick goes up. The pipeman on the left side can start chunking ground ladders. The right side officer and that firefighter, they're going to go do what they do. In the city of Houston, we never had dedicated riding positions. It wasn't interior, exterior teams. That was always done at the company level by the company officer made that decision. And that's when Steve and I were there together. That's how we operated. Left side did left side stuff. Right side did right side stuff. And what we have to understand, and this is a pet peeve of mine, apparatus chauffeurs, truck chauffeurs, whether you call them DOs, EOs, or AOs, their whole purpose in life when they show up at a working fire is to get the aerial up. At the end of the day, somebody else can be chunking that ground ladder. But the aerial is the most reliable and safest means to get your crew up, but also out should things go bad. In the Houston Fire Department, I hate to say it because I'm retired, but we were really bad about putting people on the floors of a burning building and not giving them another way out. I decided that when I became
lost you, Larry,
set and give a roof report before the box was tapped out because it was nothing. Or if it was burning, we were set up, we were good to go for roof ventilation. I can throw it to a window, whatever. And so we have to start ingraining this in the new people, that it is not 100-foot, arm to reach out when it's convenient. It needs to be done every time to become proficient and to give our people a way in, but more importantly, a way out when things go bad.
Hey, Chief,
Yep. Go ahead.
just to explain the thought process on the aerial as the last thing up. Our truck company is a 3-man truck company, chauffeur, officer, and fireman. So, and usually, if we're the only one in the district right now, we're first on scene. Me and the can are going in doing a search, and the chauffeur is usually going to do outside vent work, which is throwing ground ladders and taking windows. And then once a second unit comes in that's going to marry up with him, then they usually go to the roof. If we're second due to a mutual aid call, then yeah, we're usually throwing the aerial up to where we needed to go. If we're going mutual aid to the next town's over, that aerial's going up. We're usually positioning for either first due truck work or second due truck work, depending on when we get toned out for the calls. But it's situational depending. I wanted to clarify that aerial is not the last thing going up. It's it's call dependent on what we're doing.
Good deal. No, good conversation, guys, for sure. I mean, very good conversation. Lou, thank you for your willingness to hop up on stage. I appreciate it, man. Captain Dugan, back up top. What's going on?
Nothing. I just wanted to bring up 2 points. The first one is on the ridge vents that we do have, because I had a friend who sent me some pictures, and I've got to find them, of somebody putting a roof ladder up on a ridge vent, and they didn't knock the ridge vent down. And the hooks on the hook ladder, on the roof ladder, were in the ridge vent. And when they started putting weight on it, the brothers started climbing it. It ripped the metal and started sliding down the roof. If you are using one of those that looks raised off the roof, and some of them are, not all of them are, just make sure that you smash it down and set that roof ladder and give it a test before you climb up on that, because it can be a problem if it hasn't been dropped very well and the hooks aren't set properly. And the other one is on apparatus positioning, and I know we're not going to go into it deep, but the truck is not a fireboat. We don't anchor it. If the positioning is bad, we move it up 10 feet, move it back 5 feet, whatever else it is. But we have to make sure with the positioning that the other apparatus that we work together to train for positioning. You never park something 20 feet behind a truck if the ladders come off the rear. You be aware of it. The chief's car never parks near the rigs. All of that stuff. It's all what we do. That's where our drills come in for us. That's where we come in our drills, and we make sure we understand that we're going to have to get these ladders out. Don't handcuff us.
For sure. I mean, in that whole concept of position, don't park, right? I mean, you hear it all the time. It's talked about a lot, and so on. And I get it completely. And, certainly neighborhoods, don't park cars, and setbacks and everything else dictate. But we do have to get into that aggressive mindset where, especially your first due aerial needs to be in a position to be used, unless it's completely blocked out. But it shouldn't be unless the environment dictates that. But for sure, Cap. I mean, very good points there for sure. Also on the roof ladder with the ridge vents as well. So good points. I thank you. I thank everybody for hopping up into the room. I see a bunch of other guys down below, that probably have a couple great nuggets to share, and I'd love to capture a few more before we wrap this up. There is something though, while we go here, that I wanted to talk about too, and we talk about building construction a little bit. We did talk about that lightweight construction. And Lou brought up before about some of the, I'm losing my words right now, but the different setups on the roof, different vent points, soil pipes, things like that. Sean, Larry, maybe you guys can, hop in there real quick. Talk about some landmark things to look for when you're on the roof, if you're considering when it comes to building construction, about those different natural ventilation points versus soil pipes versus chimneys, things like that.
I used to be a big fan of knocking turbine vents off, but when you read the science, unless you have to, a turbine vent actually is designed to move and ventilate the attic space better than if you kick it off and you just leave an open pipe. And so I've had to readjust my thought process because it was a natural thing. You go up there and you hit it with the hook. Ridge vent, as Captain Dugan pointed out. I mean, you can pick up 14 plus square feet of ventilation space just by pulling a ridge vent from left to right.
Just for clarity, Larry, because I'm pretty sure, but a turbine vent is the one that spins by itself, correct? It's like a mushroom cap almost, right? And it's
yeah. Early thing.
Yep. Okay. I just want to make sure.
When you look at the science behind it, they actually will spin faster the hotter the whatever's in the attic is. And so realistically, you're going to actually affect greater ventilation through a turbine vent by leaving it in place. Soil pipes, pull the rain cover off of it, they're going to chug out X amount of ventilation. I mean, you can use that as your landmarks. If you're getting reports on Division 1 or Division 2, you got people trapped in a certain part of the building. If you even have an understanding or basic, somebody pointed out that at the beginning of this, Captain Dugan did, what was that half window? Well, that's a bathroom. Well, if you're oriented when you're reading the building as you're approaching, you're knowing where the stovepipes are in relation to a window or a half window you saw. So you understand if you got a crew saying, hey, I got a victim in Division 2 or whatever, at that stage of the game, you can kind of cater your ventilation prioritization based upon what you're seeing on the roof using soil pipes, vent pipes, turbine vents as somewhat of a map, if you will, to help alleviate those conditions where you got a crew that may have found a victim, or you have a crew where they're saying, hey, it's getting untenable. And so realistically, it's like reading a map. And if you understand what you're looking at on the roof as a soil pipe that's going here, or you got a pipe that's going here, you're not going to be 100% because of remodels and just things that people do to their homes. But it's always a good frame of reference to at least start from when you're up top. And that's with perfect visibility, and that's something else too, that was good visibility in those slides. Everybody in this room has been on roofs that are absolutely horrible. You're on the wrong side of the wind. You're on the wrong side of the ridge row, and it's blowing towards you. Even if you make your cuts in the right order and you're trying to work from windward to leeward, you're still going to be in that position where things change. We've all cut a hole where the wind shifts halfway through the cut, and you just have to get it done. And so realistically, if you understand what you're dealing with, Captain Dugan said it, I think Sean said it, it comes down to understanding your building construction, understanding what you're doing, what your tactical priorities are, they fit into the strategic game plan, what the incident commander wants you to do, what your officer or you as the officer needs to get done, and you get it done quickly because you train, you drill at it. You understand what you're looking at. You understand that if you see a soil pipe, you understand what that means. You understand that it's no different than searching a house. If you're hitting a bunch of tile, you're in a bathroom. It's one of those things that should become ingrained because that's a survival thing that you should know for those situations. So if you're on a roof and you start running into pipes and you start running into things, you need to be able to understand how that translates to the floor below you.
Sure. Good point. Sean, thoughts?
Yeah, Chief made a whole bunch of good points there. I don't know how much I have to add to, but, the roofing material, more and more, my district, I'd say 85% of the houses on one whole portion of my district are slate roofs, old style, older homes. Some are the shingle. I can't think of the name of them now, but some are shingle based. Some are like the terracotta looking. Slate roofs are big. That's a whole nother animal that I think we could probably do a whole show on that. My house, I had a metal roof put on, so you lose a little bit of those landmarks because with the metal roof. They covered up most of my natural vents except for the soil pipe, obviously, because there's already going to be a natural air gap underneath the metal roof. So, but in terms of laying it out, it's about knowing your buildings, knowing your typical, parts of my city where the newer homes are being built, where not in my district. I got to do a little more recon, I suppose, when I start, if I'm over there working and I have to, figure out where we're going to start venting these roofs. But yeah, the natural openings are great. The turbine vents, there's two schools of thought. You're right, Chief. The science says one thing. They certainly can pull fire, but we're more inclined to leave them in place unless it's super convenient. Basically it's in the way of our ladder. Otherwise, we're just going to leave those things. And but yeah, it's about knowing your buildings and knowing what you're looking at. All those natural openings are great, but you have to understand what happens if sometimes they might be aiding aiding and what's going on, the conditions inside there.
Yeah, really good point, Sean. Thank you for jumping in on that. The other thing I wanted to ask you, Sean, too, because I had Brian Butler's down in the gallery, and he sent me a text on the side. He's working, so he really can't jump on to add. So, he brought up a good point, Sean, and I think you probably see a lot of it are knee walls. And when we make determinations of where we want to begin our cuts and so on, and sometimes, cuts are made on the lower portions of the roof, and we don't see that space get any better. And typically it's a good indication of, chopped up attic space, chopped up void space, and knee walls. And I've been to several fires now where knee walls have played havoc on the, on the tactics as we go, because conditions weren't getting better, and to get those knee walls opened up is sometimes quite a task. You run into that in your area at all?
Yes, most of our houses have them. Some they're story and a half houses will have the shorter knee walls. They're 4 foot, 5 foot tall, but then the houses that are your full 2.5s have them. And we actually one of the we years ago, one of the most iconic photos on one of the trades magazines was a guy from our job head first out the window because fire broke through the knee walls and burnt the line. And he had to bail. 2 guys had to bail a fire. It was a double fatal fire that we had, but we do encounter them. And that's where, again, your roof size up there. If we open up high near the peak and nothing's happening, then that's where you start stretching down. That's where having a ladder up there for us works, because we can get lower. We can do that more of a coffin cut, if you will, and cover the living space or the attic space and get behind the knee walls, and hope that you can help the guys find the fire if they're still looking for it by getting it to light up a little bit, or just help them make that push. Knee walls can cause a lot of havoc. People forget about them. People don't realize they don't want to get in there because it's a tight space, especially in the knee walls in my house, or the way my house is laid out. I'm not a little guy. I have a hard time getting in there sometimes, especially if I was all packed out. So it's real important that if the guys from the roof can make that determination of what's going on inside there, it certainly helps the crews on the inside.
Very good points. Larry, anything to add on that?
No, I completely agree with what Sean said, and I probably talked to him for tonight.
Okay. Good, man. Well, I will tell you, I know the topic was vertical ventilation. We talked a lot about it, but there's so much more we could be covering and diving in depth, just like Sean said on a couple things. We could do a whole show just based on, slate roof or this or that. But we've been going for almost an hour and a half, and, I think we're going to start to wrap. What I'd like to do, though, is to ask anyone in the room if they have any questions or anything they want to share before we begin to wrap this episode. Please raise your hand. We'll get you right up on the stage. I'd love to hear some more, back and forth before we wrap. But if not, I just want to take the last few minutes and thank both of you, Sean and Larry, for hopping in tonight. This platform has incredible potential. Tonight we heard from a lot of just solid dudes that have a lot to share. And I think that's where the value of this platform comes into play. And so we're going to be doing one of these open mics, hopefully weekly. And it's going to be moderated by different people every week, and we'll pick another topic, and we'll roll. I do have one coming up, I believe, on March 31st. I don't know if we locked that in yet. Mickey Farrell from Top Floor Tactics. Mick, and he's down in the room tonight. We're working on something. I think we're going to be rolling it out on the 31st of this month, which would be super cool. So stay tuned. We will post that as well. Send me comments on the DM. Send me an email, nationalfireradio@gmail.com. Shoot us a DM on Instagram or an instant message on Facebook. Let us know what you thought of the conversation tonight. There is no way to converse through Clubhouse here unless you hop up on stage and be willing to share. But I'd love to get some feedback on your thoughts about using the photos tonight that Larry provided us from a fire down in Houston, which really gave us the chronological order of how things went on the fire ground. And I thought it was just a super helpful tool to have some visuals, and referring back to Instagram while we're using an audio platform like Clubhouse, I think is real beneficial. And so I think there's plenty of things we could do as we go on. If there's anyone else in the room that's willing to hop up, if you don't have anything, then we're gonna wrap. I do want to thank all of you for joining tonight. This episode was recorded. It will be put out on our podcast platform. So all of our clubhouses going forward will be shared so that you guys can share it and send it forward. For all of you that are new to the platform, if you have invites, find like-minded people and let them know how good this app is, because tonight we were able to hear from really distinguished people in the fire service, down to Fran, who piped up tonight in the very beginning, and I appreciate him doing so. Somebody that is just in love with the fire service and brand new to it. So the power of this platform, the power of conversation is just so big. And this is the only platform that I know where we can have what we just did tonight. So, Larry DiCamillo, thank you, Chief. Sean Egan, thank you, Cap. I appreciate you both very, very much for being here tonight. And Robert Ridley, as always, brother, thank you. You are the rock, man. So, without you, none of this
Thank
happened.
you.
So, I appreciate it. But, Larry, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Hey, Yus doesn't have anything to say?
Yos has been very quiet tonight down there. He's just, I think he's taking it all in. And
No, he's from Queens. He's always got an opinion.
here we go. Starting to throw around some words here. But anyway, Sean, thank you very much also for your willingness to hop in tonight, especially, you got about 1,000 other things going on. So I appreciate that.
No, I appreciate the opportunity. And to your point, there's a lot of people in the room here that are content creators that I learn from every single day. So all you keep doing what you do. Really looking forward to these chats, Jeremy and Rob. Thanks.
Yeah, awesome. And listen, man, Rob and I don't want to speak for Rob, and I love to give Rob a second to chat as well. I do talk too much, but for me, I love just being able to facilitate a platform where everybody else can talk, because there's so much to learn from. Like you said, Sean, this room is packed tonight. If people are in here knew who everybody was in here, and this is the best part about Clubhouse, is everybody is 100% real and authentic. They don't allow for fake memberships. So everybody in here has to own what they say, and their profile represents exactly who they are. So there's no punches pulled, there's no mutts in here, and so on. And so there's a lot to this platform that I think is going to bring a lot of good to the table. Like a gentleman like Captain Dugan, who was willing to hop in tonight. I appreciate his time and all his years and everything that he's done for the fire service, and I'd love to get him on an open mic one night. Wink, wink, Cap. Love to get you in, and it would just make for good conversation. So please take those invites. Everybody tonight after this episode will get more invites in your inbox from Clubhouse. Find like-minded people, share them, push it on your social media channels about how good this platform is, because tonight we probably had, 40, maybe 30, 40 people at the height. I'd love to see hundreds in here, if not thousands eventually, because I think that this platform really is the next good thing for the fire service to share the message. Rob, what do you got?
This has been awesome. I've learned a lot tonight, especially with some of the, just hearing the different parts about, our landmarks on the roof. I thought it was a great refresher for me, and I just can't wait to pass the knowledge on. I think Clubhouse is going to be awesome for this. So I'm just excited to be here.
Cool, man. Good stuff. So, again, thank you, everyone, for tuning in tonight. And we're going to be signing off. We went for an hour and a half tonight. And I certainly do appreciate all of you giving us an hour and a half of your time tonight to listen to some of these nuggets, and for everybody stopping through and being a part of this. And to everybody that was willing to come up on stage, thank you for sharing your 2 cents and your comments. It means the world. All of you tonight here make a difference to the American Fire Service. So I appreciate it. So everyone, that's a wrap for tonight. Larry and Sean, Rob, thank you very much, guys. And I wish you all have a great night. Enjoy. Hey, guys, thanks for tuning in this week and listening to another episode on the National Fire Radio podcast channels. We truly appreciate the support. We thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to listen to our interviews, our roundtables, our discussions. It means the world. Like, share, leave a comment. The more we engage, the more we can grow and push the word out and keep making this job better. Hey, guys, thanks for tuning in this week and listening to another episode on the National Fire Radio podcast channels. We truly appreciate the support. We thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to listen to our interviews, our roundtables, our discussions. It means the world. Like, share, leave a comment. The more we engage, the more we can grow and push the word out and keep making this job better.